We've learned the proper way to listen to teachings, including the right attitude and the right conduct. Today, we move to the teaching itself, the whole sequence of ngondro, or preliminary practices. I have repeatedly stressed that, although the text of the words of my perfect teacher seems simple, its meaning is very profound. So we must devote ourselves to studying it to generate conviction. Such conviction is indispensable to any practice, so please contemplate the text repeatedly so as to internalize the teachings. This sequence of practice is very important for each of us. Nowadays, many Dharma masters from the Tibetan and Han regions of China accept and guide disciples with various skillful means. While the disciples have different preferences and intentions, the masters should always urge them to establish a solid foundation through embracing the basic teachings in Buddhism. By doing so, their practice in this life won't go wrong. When Venerable Atisha came to Tibet, he secretly gave Dramtampa 1005 to 1064 the teachings of the ngondro practice sequence from the practice of precious human life to transference of consciousness. Dramtampa was puzzled, asking, "Why do you give other disciples empowerment and the secret mantras while you teach me the ngondro sequence?" Atisha answered, "Because I have no one to whom this teaching can be entrusted except you." Due to this, Dramtampa became the lineage holder after Atisha, and his Dharma activities were very vast. Once, Kadampa Master Puchungwa 31-1106 asked Geshe Chengoa 1033-1103 two options. One is well-versed in the 5 major sciences, having the 5 psychic abilities and attaining 8 ordinary accomplishments, and the other is experiencing the stages of the path to arise in the mind. Which one do you choose? Geshe Chengawa answered, "Not to mention experiencing the stages of the path to arise in the mind, even if it is just having the conviction that the stages of the path are indeed like this, is sufficient for me to make the choice. In our past lives, we have been well versed in the 5 major sciences, have had 5 psychic abilities, and attained 8 classical cities innumerable times, yet we were not freed from samsara. If we have conviction about the ngondro practice sequence, definitely we will be liberated from samsara. Therefore, practitioners in the degenerate age shouldn't first go after the high teachings. Instead, we must start with the ngondro practices. We should understand the meaning of the ngondro guidance, but most importantly, we must meditate on each guidance one by one. For example, when meditating on the precious human life, we should develop this conviction. It is very precious for me to have this human life, and it is even more precious to have a human life during which one can study the Dharma. Now that I have this precious human life, from now on I must always use it to diligently practice the Dharma. If such a conviction arises in you, your practice will start well and end well. We should follow in the footsteps of eminent masters of the past. Being practitioners with superior faculties, those masters still followed the sequence and completed the practices with great diligence. In comparison, how can we, ordinary people with heavy karmic debts and strong afflictions, not dedicate ourselves to the diligent practice of ngondro? If you want your practice along the path to not regress, the key lies in your current effort in the ngondro practice. Since the beginningless time, our afflictions have been deeply rooted in our mind stream. So your afflictions won't be uprooted right away by just studying the Dharma sporadically for a short period of time. Thus, we must first complete ngondro, including the common and uncommon preliminary practices. It is not too hard to understand the text of the words of my perfect teacher. For example, what are the 8 states without freedom? What are the 10 advantages? How is the cyclic rebirth in the 6 realms? The contents in this text are much easier to understand than those in Buddhist logic and treasury of Abhidharma. But when you practice ngondro, make sure you don't just know the verbal meaning of the text. Most important is to develop conviction in the mind and generate irreversible faith in each meditative guidance. Once, Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang went to visit his guru. His guru asked him about the progress of his ngondro practice. Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang answered, "I can't say that I have completed the 4 common preliminary practices perfectly and impeccably, but from my practice here are something I feel certain about myself. Since I was a young child, I had little interest in worldly wealth and fame. Especially now, your blessings have enabled me to understand that everything is an illusion without inherent existence. So I don't have to try hard to generate renunciation, as my renunciation arises naturally. Meanwhile, my faith in the 3 jewels increases day by day, and what I say aligns with what I really think. I fully understand that bodhicitta is the foundation of the Mahayana path, so whoever I meet in daily life, friends or foes, families or strangers, I regard them as my mothers of past lives and sincerely hope they will be free from suffering and will enjoy happiness." Hearing this, his guru was very happy, saying, "That is certainly ideal. However, it is worth mentioning that the state attained through ngondro may regress easily if not followed by sustained practice. This is because our mind is covered over by deep, heavy afflictions. Thus, although you seem to know the text very well now, over time you may easily forget it. You should thoroughly know by heart and firmly hold on to the definition, outline, and sequential order of each ngondro practice. Therefore, you'd better memorize by heart the entire text of the words of my perfect teacher." The guru then gave him a copy of the text. Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang followed his guru's instructions and memorized the entire text. Knowing this, his guru was very delighted and highly praised him. Unlike many of us, Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang didn't negotiate with his guru by saying, "I am busy, I am tired, I am sick," and so forth. Some Dharma students would come up with many reasons to avoid memorizing the short text of Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, let alone such a long text. Many practitioners in Tibetan Buddhism memorize the text of the words of my perfect teacher word by word. Of course, to achieve this, practitioners must put great effort into mastering the text, and by doing so, the text will be etched in their memory for the whole lifetime. Whenever they need certain contents from the text, the words naturally arise in their minds. In contrast, you merely attend the teaching and then lay aside the Dharma book, which you never read again, or you flip through the book a few years ago and never touch it since. In such cases, not to mention remembering the content by heart, you won't even easily recall a single piece of scriptural evidence in the text. Many Khenpos at Larungar are well versed in the words of my perfect teacher. For example, some of them have memorized the text by heart. Others are exceptionally familiar with the content, although they haven't memorized every single word. When a story, quote, or paragraph is brought up, they immediately know where it is by heart. As for me, I have a very deep affinity with the words of my perfect teacher. When I first studied the Dharma, I listened to the teaching of this text. At that time, I wrote down all the scriptural evidence and Buddhist stories in my diary. While I was practicing my ngondro, I would try to memorize these notes during my lunch break. Therefore, I've memorized all the scriptural evidence and stories in the words of my perfect teacher. Although I didn't memorize the text word by word, I still remember clearly which stories, scriptural evidence, and arguments appear in which sections of the text. Patrul Rinpoche's words, the essence of his wisdom and compassion, arise very often in my mind. However, many people don't pay enough attention to the text. They just put the copy on their shrine as an object of veneration or put it away after reading it only once. Many people read the words of my perfect teacher in the same way they read a novel. They go through the text overnight, then put it back on the bookshelf and never read it anymore. This is not right. If a great enlightened master like Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang made a great effort to memorize the text by heart, how can we ordinary people place little importance on it? If we don't place great emphasis on the text, we can hardly get the genuine blessings and attain states of realization. Nowadays, many people are skilled in their fields of expertise, such as computer science and medicine. They can easily complete professional tasks. Some Sangha members at Larungar are like this. For example, one practitioner hasn't received any special training in information technology, but whenever a computer goes wrong, they just need to meditate on the problem for a short while. Then they can pinpoint the reason and solve the issue. I find this amazing. But can they apply this special talent when studying the words of my perfect teacher? Can they pinpoint and internalize the essence of the teachings right away? I am not sure. Some people think, where Ngöndro is concerned, all the lineages in Tibetan Buddhism, be they Sakya, Gelug, or Nyingma, always talk about things like the precious human life, the impermanence of life, and more. Why not bring in innovations? Wouldn't it be great if a new practice sequence was introduced? Such a thought is truly naive. Eminent masters are fully aware of the sequence an ordinary being needs to go through in order to attain the fruition of a sublime being. By following the practice sequence, innumerable beings had attained realization in the past, and innumerable beings will attain realization in the future. Many senior Dharma masters and practitioners I've encountered put emphasis on the same instruction. Practitioners shouldn't rush to the high teachings. They should first practice ngondro well. These great masters never said a practitioner should skip ngondro and directly land on the summit of all practices and then descend in a top-down manner. Especially those great masters who have been practicing for their whole lives have all praised the importance of ngondro. They say only when one practices ngondro well can one not fall into the lower realms and instead attain real accomplishment. Meanwhile, when practicing ngondro, it is indispensable to pray to the Guru with faith and devotion. Why does Patrul Rinpoche title the text Kunzang Lame Shalung, which literally means the oral teachings of the Samantabhadra teacher? Here, Samantabhadra refers to his root guru Jigme Jalwai Nyugu, in whom Patrul Rinpoche had extreme faith. To Patrul Rinpoche, his guru was inseparable from the primordial Buddha Samantabhadra. Hence, he called his root guru Samantabhadra. In Tibet, a faithful disciple dares not refer to the guru directly by name. For example, debaters in Tibetan Buddhism refer to Venerable Longchenpa as Longchen Rabjam of the Dharmakaya, while disciples of Khenpo Shenga, 1871 to 1927, refer to their guru as Vajradhara Shenga Rinpoche. Guru devotion is extremely important. If you regard the words of my perfect teacher as an ordinary novel-like text, and you never pray to the lineage masters with faith, you won't be able to open the door of wisdom. Buddhism always emphasizes that a practitioner should never be parted from faith and compassion. Lineage masters and their teachings have inconceivable blessings, and the teachings are actually the essence of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Now that we are fortunate enough to encounter the teachings of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and lineage masters, we should have extraordinary faith in them. This is the meaning of never be parted from faith. Meanwhile, we should think in this way. Due to our ripened merits, we have encountered the supreme teachers and the Mahayana teachings, whereas tens of thousands of beings around us are still deeply trapped in the ocean of samsara's suffering due to their ignorance. Thus, we ought to generate fervent compassion toward those beings, hoping that one day we will liberate them all. We will share the Mahayana teachings with them instead of keeping them to ourselves, so that all beings in the three realms will be nourished by Dharma rain. This is the meaning of never be parted from compassion. If studying and practicing the Dharma with faith and compassion, our mind will be nourished and will gradually soften. In contrast, without faith in Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and compassion toward beings of the six realms, Perhaps you may remember and explain the teachings clearly at the beginning, but eventually your Dharma activities may not necessarily flourish. Dharma study is not like an intellectual contest on the pure accumulation of knowledge. Instead, a Buddhist must integrate the teachings bit by bit into their mind and heart. In fact, the inner state is reflected by the outer signs of speech and actions. If your mind is at peace, your body and speech will appear peaceful. Wherever you are, be it a quiet temple or a crowded marketplace, if your mind remains peaceful, you will always be as carefree as flowing water and floating clouds, and will not get tainted by the muck of worldly affairs. The Flower Garland Sutra says, "Just like the lotus flower to which mud and water cannot cling, or sun and moon that course unhindered through the sky. By then, whatever you do, dwelling in the mountains and forests with tigers and wolves as companions, or living a bustling worldly life with many others, you are benefiting other beings. And when causes and conditions ripen, you can teach the supreme Dharma to others. If you aspire to benefit beings and propagate the Dharma, you will always find the opportunity to do so at any time. Of course, you must first complete the ngondro. If you've never contemplated the precious human life, you will still feel that wealth and social status matter, and that human life is nothing precious. As a result, you will pursue worldly goals and can hardly succeed in your Dharma practice. In contrast, if you understand the ngondro teachings, contemplate them again and again, and practice well, you will have absolutely no problem with any other practice. I dare to guarantee you this. Speaking of guarantee, when a patient asks whether a doctor can guarantee a cure, the doctor may answer, "Oh, I cannot guarantee anything, not even a cure for a cold." Similarly, if you don't practice ngondro, I dare not sign a guarantee saying your practice will definitely be a success. But if you practice well, even a person like me will dare to sign such a guarantee. Many people say to me, "I want to become a real Dharma practitioner in this life, so please, my guru, sign a guarantee for me." Well, it depends on your ngondro practice. If you practice well, you should be able to become a good practitioner, so I am okay to sign. Otherwise, the world is quite complicated and filled with temptations. Ordinary beings can be easily lured by external bait. As no one dares to guarantee a child's safety if the child goes to a battlefield, I dare not guarantee anything for those living in this turbid world who never practice ngondro. Thus, ngondro is crucial for practitioners of this degenerate era. The teaching itself has three parts. First, the ordinary or external preliminaries, or common preliminaries. Second, the extraordinary or internal preliminaries, or uncommon preliminaries. Third, the swift path of transference. The difference between common and uncommon lies in the following aspects. First, common means the teachings are in common with Sutrayana. Uncommon means the teachings are only in the extraordinary Vajrayana. For example, teachings concerning the precious human life and the impermanence of life can also be found in Sutrayana, whereas teachings concerning the refuge of the inseparable union of the three kayas, the purification practice of Vajrasattva, and the Kusali's accumulation are exclusively in Vajrayana and are not explicitly covered in Sutrayana. Second, common means the teachings are in common with those in Theravada. Uncommon means the teachings are unique to Mahayana. Teachings of the precious human life, the impermanence of life, following the teacher, and more can be found in the classical Theravada texts, whereas teachings of Mahayana refuge, bodhicitta, and Vajrasattva cannot be found there. Third, common means the teachings are in common with those of other lineages such as Gelug and Sakya. Uncommon means the teachings are unique to Nyingma. For example, all the lineages have teachings on the precious human life and the impermanence of life, whereas practices involving the visualization of Padmasambhava are unique to Nyingma. Fourth, according to the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, Common also means the teachings include foundational instructions that can be practiced by people from different lineages, whereas uncommon means the teachings are pith instructions that cannot be practiced by practitioners of other lineages. In short, there are different ways to interpret common and uncommon. The teaching itself, an explanation of how difficult it is to find the freedoms and advantages. Common preliminary practices. The common preliminary practices include 6 subjects. First, the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages. Second, the impermanence of life. Third, the defects of samsara. Fourth, actions, the principle of cause and effect. Fifth, the benefits of liberation. And sixth, how to follow a spiritual friend. The chapter on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages is explained in 4 sections, reflecting on the nature of freedom, reflecting on the particular advantages related to Dharma, reflecting on images that show how difficult it is to find the freedoms and advantages, and reflecting on numerical comparisons. 1. Reflecting on the nature of freedom. Generally speaking, freedom refers to having the opportunity to practice Dharma and not being born in one of the 8 states devoid of opportunity. Nowadays, many people complain, "I am so busy, I have to work. I have to handle things at home. I have no time for ngondro. I have no time to listen to teachings. When I finally retire and my family members are less dependent on me, I will go back to the Dharma." Day after day, they procrastinate about their practice. This wrong attitude and its corresponding actions are also considered a sort of lack of freedom. But strictly speaking, lack of freedom refers to those states covered below. They are categorized into 8 states according to beings' existential states and humans' particular conditions. If one were to be born in one of the 8 states, there would indeed be no opportunity to practice Dharma. A guide to the words of my perfect teacher covers extensively the 8 states without freedom. When meditating on the lack of freedom, Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang suggests starting from Guru Yoga practice, then proceeding to analytical meditation on the 8 states, with each state described in great detail in the text. Each of you should consult this guide, which includes profound pith instructions for practice. Recently, we learned Khenpo Ngawang Pelzang's suggestion on meditation. Each meditation session should consist of the preliminary practice, the main part, and the conclusion. The preliminary practice includes the essential points for the body, speech, and mind, and prayer, while the main practice focuses on meditating according to the guidance, starting by meditating on the topics of the precious human life. When studying the preliminaries, you should integrate the contents of the words of my perfect teacher with the practice instructions in a guide to the words of my perfect teacher and the scriptural evidence and reasoning in the Great Chariot, Longchenpa's auto-commentary on finding rest in the nature of the mind. Then, you should devote yourself to the practice accordingly. By doing so, a rock-solid conviction will arise in your mind. Those who are following the teaching meditate on the 10 instructions regarding the precious human life. If you are not satisfied with your present practice, you may repeat the meditations all over again. The text in the meditation guidance seems very easy to understand for everyone, so some people don't see the point in doing the practice. However, knowing the literal meaning versus generating conviction in the mind are 2 very different things, so please make sure you emphasize meditation. The 8 states of lack of freedom are not unique to Tibetan Buddhism. They are explicitly explained in the classical Buddhist works, including Madhyama Agama and Sutra of the 8 States Without Freedom and 8 Freedoms. It is sad that many of these classical works are stacked on shelves in the libraries of Buddhist scriptures and remain undisturbed by readers. Throughout history, giving and listening to Dharma teachings haven't been a particularly popular tradition in Chinese Buddhism. Especially nowadays, Lay practitioners have a relatively good understanding of the Dharma, but some monastics seem to be occupied with various other activities, and their interest in listening to and reflecting on the Dharma appears to be lacking. Normally, monastics should carry out the tasks of giving teachings and benefiting others, whereas lay practitioners cannot fully devote themselves to Dharma activities because they have to make a living. If a householder doesn't work as a businessman, an industrial worker, or a farmer, who else can support his living? A monastic shouldn't stay in the temple all day to simply relax or practice alone and feel content to just make lamp offerings in front of Buddha's statues. Since the monastic has forgone everything, including family and career, they should devote themselves wholeheartedly to protecting and upholding the Buddha's teachings. Therefore, the monastic should not only be well-versed in the Dharma, but also give teachings to others. I wish that every monastery or temple would offer Dharma teachings. Only when there is teaching can the true Dharma still remain in the world. If monastics do not give teachings, then the temples would be left with only Buddhist statues and scriptures. Whether there are monastics in the temple or not would not make much difference. Such a temple is no different from some ordinary tourist attractions where, for the sake of collecting donations, statues of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas marked with words, such as blessing or safety, are placed. Except for a very few temples, most temples in Han areas don't emphasize Dharma studies enough. The tradition of giving and listening to teachings is far less popular in Han areas than in Tibetan areas. Therefore, I sincerely wish for each temple in a Han area to have a teaching center for listening to teachings and a retreat center for practicing the Dharma. Teaching and practicing are the core of the Dharma, while everything else is just peripheral to monastics. Nevertheless, some monastics aspire to spread the Dharma. However, they don't have a voice in their temples. Similar things also happen in Tibetan monasteries. For example, a Khenpo wants to vigorously promote Dharma teaching, but the abbot disapproves of it, so the Khenpo cannot do too much. Some monastics experience the same situation as this Khenpo. They wish to give teachings, yet the abbot wants to keep the status quo and make no changes. As a result, the monastics' wishes are met with conflicting reality. In fact, a temple and a monastery should play the role of propagating the Dharma and benefiting beings. Otherwise, it is just a place for making incense offerings to Buddha's statues. Hence, whether that is qualified as an activity propagating the Dharma is worth further examination. Therefore, Dharma teachings should be promoted as much as possible. If some temples don't have the tradition of teaching the Dharma, they should now try to establish such a tradition. Lack of freedom refers to those 8 states devoid of such an opportunity. Being born in the hells, in the Preta realm, as an animal, a long-lived god, or a barbarian, having wrong views, being born when there is no Buddha, or being born deaf and mute. There are the 8 states without freedom. First, being born in the hells. Hell beings have no opportunity to practice the Dharma due to the relentless suffering they endure from extreme heat or cold. They also experience excruciating sufferings in the ephemeral hells and the neighboring hells. The Sutra of the 8 States Without Freedom and 8 Freedoms says, beings in the hells of copper pillars and iron hills suffer excruciating pains. So do beings in the hells of the pit of hot embers, the swamp of putrescent corpses, and the forest of swords. While being tormented in the hells, how can they have the opportunity to listen to the authentic teachings? Second, being born in the Preta realm. The Pretas, or hungry ghosts, have no opportunity to practice the Dharma due to the suffering they experience from hunger and thirst. Let alone hungry ghosts, even a human missing one meal doesn't want to practice. For example, someone takes the 8 one-day precepts, and by the evening, they have no energy for listening to teachings, memorizing verses, or making prostrations. They try to go to sleep earlier, but cannot. Therefore, when in a state of hunger and thirst, it is hard for a person to practice the Dharma. The Buddha says, extremely hungry and thirsty, the Prita's throat is thinner than a needle, and the sufferings are excruciating. Rain falls into the river and becomes a raging fire, and Pritas are tormented in it. How can they have the opportunity to listen to the authentic teachings? We are so fortunate we were not reborn as a hungry ghost in this life. Otherwise, let alone engaging in a formal Dharma practice, we wouldn't even have had the opportunity to recite the mantra of Avalokiteshvara or listen to the teaching of one sutra. Third, being born as an animal. Animals, such as fish and shrimp in the ocean, or cattle and horses on the ground, have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they are subjected to enslavement and attacks from other animals. The Buddha says, constantly intending to harm each other, often seeking to devour others. The animals are tormented in such a realm. How can they have the opportunity to listen to the authentic teachings? Fourth, being born as long-lived gods. The long-lived gods have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they live in a state of mental blankness. There are different explanations regarding where these gods live. It could be in the Arupa Loka, the world of formlessness, the Kamadhatu, the world of desire, or the fourth heaven of the Rupadhatu, the world of form. Nevertheless, beings reborn as a long-lived god abide in a state of perceiving nothing for kalpas, so they cannot practice the Dharma. Some Dharma practitioners stay at home mindlessly. Half an hour has passed, and their minds are still blank. Maybe they are about to be reborn as long-lived gods. Very dangerous. The audience laughs. The long-lived gods don't generate a single thought within multiple kalpas, and eventually they fall into lower realms due to the arising of a wrong thought, so they don't have the opportunity to practice. The Buddha says, those who were reborn in the abode of Akanishta, due to the merits of previous lives, live a long life, but cannot discern enlightenment and wisdom. How can they have the opportunity to listen to the authentic teachings? Fifth, being born as a barbarian. Barbarians, those born in border countries, have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because the Buddha's teaching is unavailable in such places. There are neither the scriptures of the Dharma, nor the realization of the Dharma, nor the fourfold assembly, i.e., monks, nuns, male lay disciples, and female lay disciples, in such places, so there is no opportunity to practice. People living in some places have never even heard the name of the three jewels. They cannot distinguish Buddhas from gods. In particular, people living in certain rural places know nothing about Buddhism, and their way of thinking is scary. The law of karma doesn't exist in their minds at all. If a person is reborn in such a barbarian place, definitely they have no opportunity to practice the Dharma. For example, the hometowns of some Han Chinese monastics at Larung Gar have no signs of Buddhism, so these places are literally border countries. When a person from such a place becomes a monastic, their family feels ashamed. Normally, when a person from a family that has been committing negative actions for generations decides to take ordination, all of their family members will receive the benefit, so they should be as delighted as if they received a wish-fulfilling jewel. It was often said by the past eminent masters, when one child takes ordination, 9 clans of kinsmen will ascend to heaven. But the views of these family members instead are upside down. They think, what a shame that my daughter is now a nun. When she comes back to visit me for the spring festival, I hope she is not hairless. She should grow her hair before coming back. It is fine even if the hair is very short. Otherwise, how can I face others? Such people are considered barbarian. The Buddha says, being born in border countries full of unvirtuous actions, never hearing the teachings of the Dharma, having no discernment, and always living in barbarian places, how can those people have the opportunity to listen to the authentic teaching? When I see certain Han Chinese monastics at Larungar not studying and practicing well, I sometimes feel a bit disappointed and discouraged. But when I think that they forewent family and career, resisted all pressure, and got ordained in this sacred place, I feel inspired by their courage, especially when I compare them with those worldly people. Some of these monastics used to have beautiful hair, but even though they found nobody to give them the head shaving ceremony, they managed to shave all the hair off by themselves. What courage! As you have witnessed, nowadays many people constantly engage in wrongdoing, such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying. They excel in negative actions, but rarely do anything wholesome. Upon first hearing the term three jewels, they may associate it with agate, coral, and diamond. How precious it is that we have the opportunity to practice the Dharma in this turbid world. Sixth, having wrong views. Those born as Tirthakas or with similar wrong views have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because their minds are deeply entrenched in those mistaken beliefs. Tirthakas refer to non-Buddhist religious or philosophical traditions, adhering to extreme views of eternalism and nihilism. Nowadays, there are many proponents of nihilism who refute the existence of rebirth, karma, the blissful pure land, hells, and so forth. There are also some people who, although holding no such extreme views, have no particular visions or life values. They are content with just a decent living standard, eating well and dressing well. Their goal of life is no different from that of a yak. The Buddha says, having no faith in the three jewels, refuting the law of karma and the existence of noble beings, these wrong views obscuring the mind, how can those people have the opportunity to listen to the authentic teachings? Sometimes we hold wrong views and have doubts. If a child early on establishes right views, including that the Pure Land exists and the law of karma is true, when he grows up, it is very likely that he will still hold those views. However, many people didn't grow up with Buddhism. They were inculcated with atheistic views. When they first study the Dharma, it is hard for them to change those views. Therefore, doubts may easily arise. Such doubts can be cleared with the true wisdom of Dharma. Without uprooting those doubts, wrong views will always arise in people's minds, preventing them from practicing the Dharma. Seventh, being born when there is no Buddha. Those born during a dark kalpa have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they never even hear of the three jewels and cannot discern between good and bad. Luckily, we were not born during a dark kalpa. Now that the Buddha has appeared and has turned the Dharma wheels 3 times, and the Dharma still abides in the world, we are fortunate to have been born in an era illuminated by the wisdom of the Buddha, which guides us in discerning between good and bad. If we were born during a dark kalpa, we would have no opportunity to practice. The Buddha says, the Buddhas don't appear. The sublime Dharma doesn't come into the world. Being born in such a dark kalpa, how can people have the opportunity to listen to authentic teaching? Eighth, being born deaf and mute. Those born mute or with cognitive impairments have no opportunity to practice the Dharma due to their incomplete faculties. The Buddha says, negative karmas from previous lives result in rebirth as a person with incomplete faculties. When a person is deaf, blind, mute, or mentally deficient, like a yak living in the form of a human, how can that person have the opportunity to listen to authentic teaching? In short, the Buddha says, the 8 states without freedom that I listed are the difficult states of sentient beings. Those who are in the states with freedom are rare and precious in the world. The 8 states without freedom in the Buddha's teachings are the difficult states of sentient beings. If an individual is free from the 8 states and has freedom, then he has no obstacles preventing him from practicing Dharma. Such a person is truly rare and precious in this world. Nowadays, some people applaud an individual's worldly success, saying he earned $1 million this year, so rare and precious. He is promoted to the position of a top government official, so rare and precious. Alas, nothing is rare and precious about these so-called successes. The truly rare and precious thing is this. You used to be a busy prisoner living in the city, and you could not even spare 1 hour a day on Dharma practice. But now that you've laid aside worldly matters and practiced the Dharma with ease, this kind of happiness is indeed rare and precious. Therefore, we should try our very best to have such freedom. Where worldly pursuits are concerned, some people are well organized and always have time. However, when it comes to Dharma practice, they find all kinds of excuses to dodge practice. They say, I don't have time, I am too busy, etc. For example, if the goal is meditating on bodhicitta, it can be hard for a person to get up at 8 a.m. to practice. But as for going to work, the same person has no problem getting up at 7 a.m. This indicates they have serious karmic obstacles. We are practicing ngondro. Some can prostrate 180-200 times for half an hour every day, while others cannot. In fact, it is you who bring upon yourself states without freedom. However busy you are, certainly you can spare half an hour. Please discipline yourself well. I think this is very important.